Good evening and welcome to Exegete This, your UK Christian podcast. My name is Metin, this is Stephen, and this week we have done a load of preparation for you, This is going to be fantastic. No, we haven't prepared at all, have we?
No.
But obviously the big news, I guess, of today is that there's war in Europe. Russia has invaded Ukraine, which we were praying yesterday that wouldn't happen, that things would de-escalate. Obviously we need to continually carry on praying for Ukraine and peace as a whole, and what's going on. So I don't know if you've been watching much of the news today or seen much as to...
I haven't. I think people have been talking about this as a possibility for so many weeks. It sort of drifted off my radar. I didn't really think it was likely. I didn't think Russia had anything to gain by invading.
Well,
so this comes as a bit of a surprise.
Sure, I mean, I saw, I think Peter Hitchens on Talk Radio, I think it was 3 days ago, saying he'd be staring mad if he was to do it. Didn't seem likely in his opinion. I mean, I think he was a Russian.
He was a Moscow correspondent for a few years. Yeah.
So there's a bit of knowledge in that area, but staring mad, I think, is and a lot of people, I think, are a bit confused as to why now, but. He gave the order. I think it was about 6 a.m. our time, something like that. Something around then, to give the order to go in. They started attacking on multiple fronts, and I saw as well a guy on GB News. I think it was a former spokesman for Putin, basically just saying, "Well, everyone there speaks Russian anyway." Or that kind of thing. It's like, what? like that makes them part of your country because thing. But I was obviously people are saying that he's never recognised their independence, saying, well, they're all Russian, but he said the same thing of places like Poland and all the rest of the former Soviet Union states, and that he wants to basically rebuild what he sees as his or more, which I mean, I said it a while ago with the US election, both with Ukraine and Taiwan, that those Russia and China would be emboldened and see an opportunity, given a weak president, to take their chance to invade. And I think that there was also some reports of Chinese flying into Taiwanese space, 8 or so. I think a bit of a coincidence that, but. It's obviously very concerning, and I guess our prayers with people of Ukraine. Were you in the middle of saying something?
No, only that when people say they can't understand why, I think that's a failure on our behalf.
Yes.
Because Peter Hitchens said he'd be stark raving mad to go in. But I suspect he's not mad. No. He might be wrong, and he might be wicked. But it probably makes some sort of sense to him. And it bothers me when people just either can't be bothered to make any effort to understand even their enemy, or assume that they can't make sense because they're doing something that they don't like.
Yeah.
So I'd want to understand what could possibly be the aim of this. It might well be that it's been something he's always hoped for, and here's the opportunity, like say with a weak West, a fractured Europe, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But you very seldom get that kind of analysis in the media, which is the kind of thing I really value.
As in what their motives are.
Yeah. So I saw Layla was reading something earlier, and even just a few lines. He gave a speech, and they were saying the things he was saying were inconsistent and contradictory. And it's like, okay, but are you telling me that he's the only person in Russia who feels like this?
Yeah.
And that no one who he's speaking to, because I don't think Russia today is the Soviet Union. I was talking to a Romanian guy the other week, and he said he thought Ceausescu genuinely believed he was loved by everyone. Yeah, he'd go there and they'd tie the apples on the trees to show it was fruitful, and everyone would clap at everything, and that he's the adoring master. I don't think that's the Russian relationship to their current state.
Well, I was listening to, I think it was maybe the Ben Shapiro podcast, where he cited a few polls that were done, and someone like Stalin obviously was seen, I think in the end of the 20th century, saying he was viewed as obviously in a negative light within the Russian opinion, but that's not the case now. That there's almost a romantic nostalgia for some sense of greatness of their sort of what they think was theirs, I guess, and just saying that he's actually viewed as having a favorably in history in their area as well. And there was something else he said on it. I've just forgotten what it was as you were talking. So just getting into the mindset, I think it was, of saying, not everyone wants what people in the West want.
That's right.
Not everybody is concerned with their own personal wealth and comfort and ease of living, safety and security. And I think we've definitely gone safety mad over the last, 20, 30 years at least. They long for that sort of sense of greatness and
national pride,
and something to feel proud of, and a national greatness, rather than simply, if their economy is not necessarily going anywhere, or if maybe they're not taken seriously and maybe on a world stage, or all these kind of things, that they want some kind of some nostalgia for greatness and but it's unfortunate that we're still reliant. Obviously, there's huge economic impacts on gas prices and things like that, and that kind of leans into something I think you mentioned you wanted to talk about sometime, which was sort of the environmental factor, which we've been buying their gas, and we've been shutting down our own natural resources productions and listening to a 16-year-old Swedish girl instead of maybe the wisdom of some of the older people, and becoming more self-reliant, producing our own gas if necessary, whereas we're pretending that we're lowering our carbon emissions by buying gas from Russia and oil from the Middle East.
Exporting them.
Just crazy. So, it feeds into that.
So it does environmental side. So that will come on as almost a secondary point, but it also links to, in a way, to the idea of war and conquest. Because there's a word that the Bible uses which has often got negative connotations now, and the word is dominion. It's used a number of times. And when we tend to think of dominion these days, it tends to conjure a negative view. And we think that's what's happening in Ukraine now. You've got a wicked man who wants dominion over another people.
Right.
They're not his. He wants to rule, to conquer them, so that they belong to him.
So it's like negative.
So it feels very negative.
It's a negative.
Yeah, that's a negative act. So dominion is bad, and we want people to be autonomous and free, so they're not under other people. That's the sort of general feeling. But the way the Bible talks about dominion is actually very positive in certain circumstances. And the first mention we have of the word dominion is undoubtedly a positive reference. So I'll read it. I should know it off by heart, but I'll read it. It's from Genesis chapter 1, and I think it's verse 28.
Is this the be fruitful and multiply?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So it's verse 26. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth."
So that's quite a different stance to what is generally put out there by our sort of society and as to what's right.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think what people sometimes call dominion, I would call more like domination. The control of everything is different to ruling over everything. Now, you wouldn't know it from modern politics, but you would know it from English history. We had a ruler, and they had dominion over every subject in their country. But those subjects were free to live their own lives under that, as long as they didn't contradict any of the rules of the ruler, of the sovereign. And those rules were relatively limited. But now it feels as like everything has to be controlled by. So it's domination rather than dominion. You don't rule over free people, and their freedom is everything other than where it's constrained. People are told to do this and not to do this, free to do this, free not to do that. And if something is deemed good, it has to be done for everyone. If green taxes are good, it goes on everybody's electricity bill and everybody's gas bill, regardless of whether you think it's good or not, or worthwhile or not. And so there's a lot of domination where there needs to be more dominion, ruling over things. And so, because here, you've got mankind who are to have dominion over the fish of the sea and the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. How could we control all the actions of those things? It's just we still don't understand birds. You think of their great migratory, thousands of miles, these tiny birds, these huge geese. How could we control that? So that's not what the Bible's calling us to when it says he expects man, and it's clearly man plural. He says it in the plural, and then he blesses them, Adam and Eve. It says, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion." It's something that's going forward. You can't just limit this to Adam. This is intended to be lived out in human history. And so what we're called to is a rulership over God's creation. And it was there before sin was in the world and before the fall. So this is a good thing. It has to be a good thing. Like marriage is here, and it has to be a good thing because God made it, and he makes it before the fall. And so part of this subduing of the earth and dominion is fruitfulness and multiplication. And this is really where I was coming at it, because it feels like there is a general antipathy towards the macro level multiplying and fruitfulness. So the narrative is sort of, there are too many people. You're killing the world, and you're killing humanity by killing the planet that humans are dependent on to live.
Yeah.
And so I'm not pretending that when people are concerned about this, they want all humans to die because they don't care about humans but they love the planet. I think there are some people like that.
There is a voluntary human extinction group or something.
There
like
are,
that,
yeah. So there are some pretty fringe people
as
out
long as
there.
it stays voluntary, I think we're
Yeah.
okay.
Even that. I'd rather they didn't.
Well, this is just their own choice. It's up to them.
But I think a lot of people, they don't think, oh, my children should be executed so that there aren't so many people on the world. They're looking at the big thing and they're saying, if we all continue like this, humanity will cease, or all the advances we've made will disappear. So you think, oh, if everything's based on basically fossil fuels and lots of people to sustain everything, suddenly if the amount of food drops and we've got no fuel, then people will die younger, and the whole, all the technological advances could all crumble away because we haven't looked after the world. And so they're concerned for the future of humanity, I think, and try to give them...
The people are going to have a miserable existence on no resources, basically, is that?
Because we've used them all.
So Thanos was the good guy?
I don't know who that is.
Never mind.
Is that popular culture reference?
Yeah, it's all the Marvel stuff. So there's literally sort of it's that, but on a say universe or galactic scale. There's only a finite amount of resources, and if I can get this power, then I can snap half of them out of existence, and then there'll be more resources per people and per person. Everyone will be kind of richer for it, or better off for it. So he gets the power, and spoilers, by the way. He gets the power, he snaps, and 50% of all life in the galaxy vanishes.
Wow. And
then, of course, the only way to fix that is time travel. So
it's such a cop out.
I know, it's terrible. It wasn't a great final. It was good. It's a good series of films. It's enjoyable. But he's the great villain. He's the
so he's definitely portrayed as the villain.
Oh yeah,
in the film.
But at the same time, actually, in the last film, in that section, they kind of say it's kind of right, like as life goes on, before the sort of time travel jump, they kind of, even though some things are obviously, a lot of it's a mess because things can't sustain. I guess a bit like the COVID stuff. All the supply chains are disrupted, and stuff falls out of the sky, and stuff can't work.
You don't realise how interconnected everything is.
Everything kind of falls apart. Yeah, everything falls apart. But in some way, they're kind of saying, actually, there are lots of resources to go around, and it's a bit. Anyway, he's the villain. He's the bad guy, and that's kind of. I'm not saying everyone's evil like that. Everyone who thinks this is evil like that. We should, look after what God has given us. We're to be good stewards.
That's right. Because this command isn't to have domination over it for your benefit. You're not there to extract every possible use out of the world and leave it wrung out. Fruitfulness implies another generation. Fruit is produced from a tree, but in there is the seed for the future. And so what man is supposed to do on the earth isn't supposed to, let's say, just leave it empty so there's nothing to pass on. It is supposed to be better or increased or to use the Bible word, more fruitful, which includes multiplication, more of the good things and more of people. And I think often we run into then people say, yeah, but surely that's got to stop at some point. We can't just keep multiplying. And I find it interesting that these arguments have been made many times throughout human history. Back in I think it was the 1600s, maybe the early 1700s, in England, there's a guy called Richard Malthus, and he said the same thing. Basically, England is full. There is no way we can sustain more people.
How many people were there at that time?
Like a laughable amount of people. Like maybe a million. It's crazy looking back on it, but that it seemed very real to them, and so much so that we call people doomsayers like that Malthusians.
I've never heard that before.
People say that say that to me a lot.
Right. Okay.
But no, I think you'll hear it now. In the next few weeks, you'll hear someone talk about Malthusian attitudes. That we're full.
I'm sure the last time you said that I'll hear more of something, I didn't hear more of it.
That's true. And I stuck it out for a month. Nobody said it. But
maybe I forgot already what it is.
Yeah,
Malthusian. I'll try
Malthusian,
and remember.
Yeah. So it's been going on a long time, and we look back and we think, oh, how funny.
Yeah.
But the things that were concerning them were, we just can't grow any more food.
Right.
We're doing everything we can, and we can't make more food than we currently are. We're at capacity. Our fields are producing as much as they can. So if we keep increasing, how are we going to feed everyone? And
I'm pretty sure even now we could produce more than. Well, do we produce more now than we did then?
Massively through advances in farming technology, innovation, pesticides. And some of these things have backfired. DDT and
DDT.
It was a pesticide that they used that had horrible consequences.
Right. Okay.
On other things, but in general, there has been fruitfulness that's managed to sustain a population increase, the likes of which we've never seen since the flood.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell from human history, quite the population of the world before the flood, everything's a bit different. But the last 100 years, since the Industrial Revolution, the population has really boomed. Yeah. And people say, we laugh at Malthus because they're sort of down here on the curve that isn't really, because it's exponential, and that now we're shooting up here. We can't sustain this level of population, and you might think this is simplistic, but I don't see any limits from our end that God has put on us. He has put limits in place at times. There have been terrible illnesses, wars that have reduced the human population, famines, droughts. Those sorts of things are up to him. But I don't think we get to look around at the macro situation and say everyone just needs to stop. And what's interesting, you can come in first, there are some interesting problems that come up when people try and take those things into their own hands.
Yeah. I didn't have anything to jump in with.
So what's interesting is that there are countries, China would be probably the biggest example, where they saw their population increase as a huge problem.
Yeah. So
again, on this food supply, where they're going to live, how they're going to work level.
So I heard a little bit about that, I guess, more on the sort of how they had that one-child policy.
That's right, yeah.
And now their population demographics are upside down and in serious problems, as well as Russia in serious problems. But
the West as a whole.
The West is massively in serious problems. I think we're below replacement rate.
Oh yeah, we've been below replacement for quite a number of times.
Right.
When you consider people who are born here, certainly when their grandparents were natives here, So say regardless of where you came from, if your grandparents were here, and your parents were born here, and you were born here, you're well under replacement rate. We've basically been bringing in people from other countries to cover the gaps left by the fact that there aren't enough people in the West having children. That bothers me a bit. In that, I mean, it's not that I mind those people coming because there's a gap and we need people. It doesn't feel right to.
It's a symptom.
Yeah, it feels a bit like poaching
of another problem.
Yeah.
So,
but it's interesting that trying to fix the problem of there's too many people.
Yeah.
Either in a country like China or through social changes, which I think is the main thing in the West. I don't think the main driver in the West has been because I don't think you can say it's been the main driver for the last 40 years that we're killing the planet. That's coming much more recently. I think there have been some people who thought that, but the majority of change in the West have been social changes. It's the same in South Korea. Most of the reason for the drop in fertility rate has been social change with emancipation of women, freedom to go to work, equality in the workplace, women getting very highly paid jobs, looking at the prospect of having children as a lesser option. These are all social changes, and the West have gone through a lot of these changes, and people just don't have big families. And then there's the scientific changes with contraception and the pill. I think so. You've got a lot more option to have a smaller family than you ever had before. And I think I value that control. I think that can be a really helpful thing to understand how fertility works and to be able to have some understanding of maybe we should not have another child for a bit or try and take some steps to not have another child for a bit. I'm not against planning and that sort of thing, but all of that comes together. And then you find when people have pulled away from fruitfulness, pulled away from multiplication, after 20, 30 years, as in China, the West, suddenly they realise, hang on, this has got major repercussions.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe there would have been repercussions if you'd carried on having children, but maybe they'd have been not as bad as the repercussions that we're looking at now.
Yeah. I think we've seen it in our lifetimes as well. I remember, when I was at school, I had two brothers and two sisters, which would have been fairly normal. It might have been considered a large family, but it wouldn't have been that uncommon. It wouldn't have been seen as that much. Whereas we've got 4 kids and 5 kids respectively. I'm sure you've had it where people are like, how do you manage? How can you cope? From Christians as well.
Yeah.
That can't imagine, and you just do it. You just get on with it. It doesn't, it doesn't cost as much as you think. You cope. You learn to adapt. You adjust. You make things work. It's.
And one of the things I wanted to pull this round to...
It's hard, it's sacrifice, but...
Yeah.
But it's...
Is the massive value of it. That's what I think is missing. If you just view it as a sort of equation of there are this many people, we need this many units of people to sustain X amount of people happiness on average. It's just such a dry way of thinking, well, if we don't have enough children... our standard of care in homes is going to go down because there won't be enough young people to look after us. I don't like that kind of way of viewing it. Yeah. And it can sometimes come across like that, you see, because that's how it looks to politicians. They think, oh, hang on a minute, we haven't got enough dentists. So let's find some more dentists from somewhere. And so they're trying to always respond to problems and fix these gaps. Well, we haven't got any HGV drivers, we need more HGV drivers. And you can almost reduce the whole thing to that. But marriage, and fatherhood and motherhood, and having children are wonderful blessings from God as you fulfill the subduing and the dominion over the world. And I feel that's been really lost. It is hard. It is sacrificial. It will cost you more money than if you don't have children. You'll have more sleepless nights. And so I'm not trying to negate any of that. But sometimes that's all you hear.
Yeah.
And actually, it's interesting. I went to a funeral of a slightly distant family member a couple of years ago. And all the things that were said about the lady who died they were moving, and were all personal. It wasn't, by the time she was this old, she was making this much money.
Yeah.
It was the relationships, the time she spent with people, the love and the affection, the things she taught, and it was wonderful to hear. And she was a mother. And their children were speaking. You don't get enough of that. The value of family increasing, the blessing of having children, and it disappoints me when it's only negative or even frowned upon to have. And I'm not saying each individual family has to have lots of children. But there is this general scriptural view of because we know Jesus said there are some people who are eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake, and Paul seems to be saying that there's great things that can be done by single people, and I affirm that.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that in every case everyone needs to pop out as many kids as they possibly can, but we should all recognise whether we have children or not, because some people would love to have children and can't, that children are a blessing from the Lord.
Yeah.
And family is God's normal unit of operation. And and each family, as it grows and as it plants more families, is subduing the earth, or at least has the potential, because we do now have sin in the world and it can go wrong. But as those families grow, if they follow Christ and follow his way, they are having dominion in the way that's so different to the taking over of other countries. They are exercising God-given dominion by ruling over well for the benefit of the people that they're ruling over, letting them be as free as they can be to then also go on and produce fruit and multiply. I'd love to hear a more positive view of fatherhood and motherhood. We believe it's right. Almost all Christians believe it's right for sex to only be in marriage and those sorts of things. Okay, yeah, it's right. Is it also good? Is it also blessed?
Probably find it's a minority, to be honest. Not the most, even among Christians, unfortunately.
A minority view or a minority experience?
Well, both maybe. A minority viewer. But yeah, I'm reminded of Romans 8. The whole creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. Not quite sure how the AV renders it. But there is benefit to the whole world, the whole creation will benefit from that dominion, the rule of God's people. But also, as you were talking, I was just thinking as well that it's sometimes seen as, I don't know, maybe we chase more romantic dreams of what does God have in store for my life and that kind of thing. And it's been nice to hear a guy we both listen to say, get married, have kids. And that is and teach them.
That's right.
Teach them the way of the Lord.
And love them.
Yeah.
Receive love from them.
Yeah. Train
them. You will find great value in the hard work that is to do, and great reward.
Yeah.
It's. I'd love it to become less of a minority view. Because I think almost everyone knows that that is what brings them like day-to-day meaning and value, is the people they love, the people they care for, the people who are dependent on them or upon whom they depend. Their relationships really matter, and the strongest relationships ought to be within families. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, because I need to be better. There's lots that I'd like to improve on and do better, and it's sometimes hard to be satisfied with what might seem mundane, ordinary. Going to work, providing for your family, reading, praying, being with them, enjoying one another's company. Surely there must be more special things that people have been able to do that forever.
Yeah.
This is the 21st century. What's better? We should be able to do something now, but that's what that really matters. And so a sort of community, an ethos that values that, raises everyone's game, where you can all aspire to. And so I'm trying deliberately to value those times where we're together, like round the table, when we're eating and when we're talking. Our table can get slightly rowdy at times, and it needs to not be unenjoyable for some people who are there, but it's.
They tend to shut up and just shrug when they turn teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to find a way of drawing out the best of them when they're teenagers as well. And I've seen a family, and I think, oh, if my teenagers could be like them, that'd be over the moon. And so that makes you go, well, like, how do you do this? How do you foster this respect and love and just, I've got lots to learn about it. And the more we can model it and believe that it's valuable, I think the more we can learn from each other, and the more we can get closer to the goal of what God wants us to do. Of course, whilst sin is mixed up in everything, we will fail, we will disappoint one another, but there is grace from God for those times, and not letting those sort of plot out the rest of your relationship with your kids or your wife or your husband. So yeah, if there was a failure, yes, acknowledge it, fix it, but then try and follow God. Don't just live defeated. Live as though you can never recover from it. So this general attitude of fruitfulness, and then it also makes you want to raise your children with the same kind of attitude. I was blessed to be in a family that I don't recall them talking to us like this, but it was just modelled. It was just everywhere. Families that loved their children, enjoyed being with them, were strict when they needed to be and disciplined them, but then produced families of grown-ups that love each other and depend on each other and value each other. And so it's all modelled there. And I want to pass that on. That's part of the fruitfulness. And multiplication in more than just number. In value and in love and breadth of feeling. Not just more people, but people that love each other. And families that depend on each other. And families, therefore, that are strong enough to bring others in who don't have those benefits. Who can say, because there are many people hurt or lonely who would love to be, or at least have a bit of contact with families, and there are families, I'd love to be a family with us. Well, just whenever you need to be with us, be with us. If that's regularly, if that's all the time or seldom, but we're to be secure in each other, that you can bring people in and love them, and that they can experience all the benefits of being in a family as much as you can give them. Again, I saw it modelled with my parents. There was a man who we as kids were all very fond of. And it's one of the wonderful things about growing up with this kind of attitude. It just seems normal. He came on holiday with us. At times he would come round, almost every Christmas he'd come round for Christmas Day because he didn't have anyone else to have Christmas Day with. And like, we always were, oh great, he's here. Yeah. And he was like, I think he was older than my parents. Yeah, so it wasn't like he was one of my mates. But it was lovely, and he really valued it. But we really benefited from it. And so there was a wonderful reciprocity to it. But it came from the stability that my parents established, and an openness that was very happy to have people come in and join us. And again, I see that as part of the fruitfulness that others can enjoy, because when good seed bears fruit, it bears more than it started with. And if we're sowing love and affection, one would hope that when it comes to fruit, there's more to go around than just
it's good.
Just to be kept in our little family bubbles. So it links in with dominion. It also links in with the environment in the way that, again, I'm just a lot more optimistic for the future if the Lord should tarry than a lot of other people. You say, well, what if fossil fuels run out? And maybe they will run out. I mean, I've been hearing about peak oil since I was a kid, and we haven't reached it yet, as far as I know. But look how far we've come in other technologies, and we haven't run out of fossil fuels yet. And people are inventive and can think up very clever solutions. And if it meant we all had to use our gardens more to grow vegetables, that fine. Do you know, I'm up for changes of lifestyle that are worth it to keep increasing and multiplying. I love meat, and I don't see the pressing need to reduce eating meat. But if that was a natural consequence of the world getting bigger, I would take it because meat isn't everything.
Like the amount of vegetables and that you would have to eat to get the is absolutely bonkers. I was watching something on that today, nutrition. I think if it's something beef, 15% fat or something like that, it would you'd only need, like, if you're on a carnivore diet, for example, you would need about 600 grams of meat, and that's I think it was about 2,000 calories or something. It wasn't a huge amount. They compared it with a couple of other meats. It was actually in sort of lean meats. So like, if it was just chicken, or in fact rabbit, on 98% or 2% fat, you'd starve to death.
On that amount.
Yes, you would starve to death for eating rabbit. It's something called rabbit starvation.
Yeah.
Which is if you eat rabbit,
nothing but rabbit. Yeah.
Then you starve to death because you'd have to eat. Well, not even if you ate the amount, which is like 2.5 kilos. So go from 500 grams to 2.5 kilos, you'd get an absolute ton of protein, but you've got still only a tiny amount of fat, and your body starts obviously then looking for fuel, and you starve to death eating huge amounts of.
Well, it happened to American prospectors,
didn't it? I'm not sure, but
they were living off just rabbits.
Oh right. Okay. Well, I assumed it came from somewhere, but I was just learning about this today. Just in terms of just pure nutrition, but then also in terms of the structure of proteins. I think there's 9 amino acids, and you don't get them all. Say, I eat a lot of peanut butter, for example. You don't get them all from that. It's not enough. You'd have to eat loads of this and loads of that and loads of that to get the right balance, of say 3 or 4 different things, and you'd end up eating, a huge mountain of stuff when you had a piece of beef that big. And it makes sense because you're taking. I don't know how we've got to this. The point of it is you need nutrition, and you're breaking down amino acids to build tissue. Well, animal tissue is a lot more similar to this than it is than
They-
plants are. Plants are much further.
They've got you a lot further along the process. They've done a lot of the eating of the vegetables and processed it already.
Yeah,
it's a lot more useful.
It's all there. It's much more similar. So your body just breaks it down and puts it back together. Obviously, eggs are the best. Well, apart from mother's milk, but I don't suppose you'd be getting that in much supply, to be honest. But that was interesting of just like eating meat is not so much of a problem. Again, these environmentalists are not are wrong again as far as I'm concerned. It's beef is great, and lamb great for you.
I think we got into
with the fat,
because I was saying that even if there were some things that would have to change, and I would be happy to recognise that the value of fruitfulness and multiplication is worth some small sacrifices. And something, but I like such as that's not the goal. Isn't for everyone to have everything they want all the time. But I have a lot of confidence in innovation and new technologies and just careful management.
3D printed meat.
Well, that sounds appealing.
No, not for me.
No,
thanks.
No. So what would they even be made of?
Soy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, like everything. Yeah, and so
actually, soy's not too bad in terms of amino acid profile. Sorry, just to go back on that, but it's not so good for men. But go back to what you were.
Yeah. So again, I just a more positive attitude that balances care with fruitfulness, and so I don't pretend that we should be like raping and pillaging the natural world pointlessly. But so I think that's part of the dominion is like if mankind is put here to have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and your actions mean there's hardly any birds left because you've killed them all, you're not exercising dominion in the way God expected. So things like oil tanker disasters, when you see the birds, and I think there's a direct responsibility, that's a direct consequence of our actions, and we need to do better. And we have, you see things like that, and it really does stir good emotions in people. Like, you can go too far, you think like these are animals that God put on the earth for us to have dominion over, and they died pointlessly, horribly. We should get better on it. So I don't want to pretend we're careless about it. We don't care what happens to they're only dumb animals. That's not how God views them. Proverbs says, a good man regardeth the life of his beast. You think about the animals that you have, but also they're there for your enjoyment. And I'm not saying everyone has to enjoy them, but they are there. Since the flood, God gave every living thing for man to eat and to enjoy, and so I'd love to see the change happen in Christians first. But I think we're going to rapidly need the change. And just, do you know, the problem is, it's interesting. I think China and maybe even India, definitely China, because they're much more authoritarian. This is much more part of their nature. They see the potential problem, and they're starting to move away from abortions as a positive good, which of course they were under the one-child policy. But and so I'm against abortion. I think it's a consistent Christian position. But this is not any kind of way to move against any kind of right reasoning to move against abortion. I'm grateful for every life that's saved, but the Chinese communist, it's like, it's just like a mathematical thing. It's like, we're now against abortion, not because it's a person in there, not because it's a moral evil to kill them, but because we need more units of people to sustain.
I mean, it's a roundabout way, because they're recognising that it's going to bring misery. Right? Ultimately, the end will be, this is going to be a disaster. people are going to suffer, but yeah, it's not driven out of the right. It's not driven out of a repentance and a desire to do what's right. It's just completely pragmatic.
Yeah. Whereas Christians can say a much more positive thing. Yes. This is why we're against it, not because like we want to make the mother feel bad if they get one, but because that is a person that God has also intended to be fruitful. So it is a filling of this creation mandate, and it's good to welcome children into the world and prepare them and support people to bring them up and value the work that mothers do, especially. And this is interesting, the South Korea thing I was reading about. They have a huge problem with population.
Yeah.
And it's because a lot of the women see going back to motherhood as a retrograde step. They're successful, it's a very driven economy and society, and they think it's demeaning to go back to that. But because it's so physical, isn't it? Like giving birth, breastfeeding a child, waking up in the night. It doesn't feel as glorious as being on the business around the chairman's boardroom. But we need to promote a real positive and valuable view of that work that can only be done by mothers, and the work that fathers can do that can only be done by fathers. And value this because I think I'm worried about the kind of backlash that comes when these things are taken away and the problems start to emerge, but the people that cause the problems don't understand why they cause the problems, and then they're going to look for other solutions, like you end up with all sorts. So in South Korea there is currently quite a backlash against feminism, which to me sort of sounds okay. That might sound good, but it's anti-women from what I've been reading about it. Men are angry against women because they can't find a partner. And that sort of thing can get very sour very quickly. And we've seen countries, religions that are very controlling of women, demeaning, and then you end up with back in the situation where women are just the vessels for producing more children and satisfying the sexual needs of the man, and that's not a good fix to this problem of lack of fruitfulness and multiplication. And as we've seen in Europe, if this is war in Europe, which sounds like it might be, I thought we'd finished that. It was never again after the First World War, and then after the Second World War, definitely never again. We're not doing open warfare, tanks, guns, planes invading. It's just not happening anymore. Oh, look, it is. And I think it would be, even though I've said I'm optimistic about innovation and science and things like that, I think it would be a mistake for us to say we cannot go back to a more brutal or barbaric treatment of women or children, or utilitarian view of sex and procreation, where basically it's organised, or there are, look at sex selection abortions and the population ratios in China and India again, hugely skewed. They don't sound skewed straight away. The normal ratio, I think, is 105 girls to 100 boys. That's the and it's like 180 and 120 boys to 100 girls in both of them. One of them slightly higher than the other. Huge consequences societally to that, and you're ending up in a situation which we've been in before, where the vast majority, the number of men that have children are much fewer than the number of women that have children. That's been like the historical norm. Don't know whether that makes sense, because poorer men defeated countries, their wives would often be taken, second, third wives, for the victors or the people that could afford to look after them. And you have a society where there are a load of men who can't ever achieve marriage. No prospect of having family and children. And that creates huge problems. And we've seen it before, and it could happen again. Unless God is merciful. So that's my doom. I've had the positive bit. That's my slightly more doom and gloom laden view, because we have stored up huge societal problems by devaluing motherhood in particular and pushing childhood later on in life, fewer children, or seeing them as an optional extra.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else you wanted to go over? So
no, I think.
Did you have any
covered most of the
thoughts from last week? Because I did a lot of talking last week.
That was the presuppositional one. Not massively, other than in witnessing to someone since then, it really came to me like that there is a value in the presuppositional thing, but what it really boils down to is the heart being subject to God. And unless someone is willing to bow their knee and say, "You're God and I'm not," it doesn't matter if you win the argument. It doesn't matter. So I'm not trying to negate that. I saw it in effect, and you get to the point where you realise this is the issue, and maybe that's the goal. Presuppositionally achieved, because it's got the person to basically to the point of saying, "Well, I can't serve a God like that. I won't believe in a God like that."
Yeah. We know. Yeah. He can change your heart. That's good. I don't know if I wanted to go back to something. As you know, I've been reading Joe Booth's book, Mission of God, which is definitely highly recommended. I am getting through it. It's a big book. I'm about halfway through the actual content, because there's obviously a massive wedge of references and appendices at the back of it as well. So
don't need to bother with the references.
No, I've had a look. I was like, well, this sounds like an interesting quote. I wonder who this is. I had to look back and order a couple of books out of the references, which is. But yeah, he was talking about the sort of environmentalist stuff. From the sort of point of view of counterfeit kingdom. So it's sort of a counterfeit what people are doing, or what they're trying to do is they think that this is getting in the way of us creating our utopia. You have the old the have and have-nots, the oppressed, the victims and oppressors mentality of the sort of the Marxist ideology that's very prevalent at the moment, and this sort of feeds into it in the same way of we don't have utopia because people are oppressing other and this needs to be equalized out through force and coercion, and they're sort of trying to create this. People are trying to move to this utopia, but obviously through the wrong way. Trying to, we need to have less people, whereas actually the answers you've sort of said there from some of the Bible passages there in Genesis is to be fruitful and multiply and have dominion. It's the opposite. It's the exact that the utopia that will come is achieved through God's ways and his kingdom, and not the counterfeit that we sort of try and establish. So it was really useful, really good book, very helpful, and definitely recommended. Any last words?
No, I think I've probably said enough this evening, so
right.
I'll probably leave it there.
All right, well, thanks for watching. Please do leave us a thumbs up or comment, leave us some questions down below, and we will see you in the next one.
Cheers.